Fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. The Patrick Riggins Show. Call in now at 865-243-8255. That's 243-TALK. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
And welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. It's Patrick Riggins, along with Shine, doing the radio show producing today, putting in a long shift because Tori, the lazy producer, took a vacation. Sean, didn't he get a vacation last week or last year?
I guess he did,
and he wants one this year too.
We got to keep him happy.
Gosh, I tell you, I suppose he wants lunch too.
I guess so.
You know, that's just amazing. How uncommitted is he? All right. This week, a federal appeals court struck down as unconstitutional a part of the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, specifically the part that stated in states such as Massachusetts, where gays and lesbians can legally marry, the federal government can deny these couples the right to file a joint tax return or receive a survivor's benefit under the Social Security Act. Now, whether you agree with same-sex marriage or not, this was clearly unconstitutional. The Constitution guarantees that everyone is created equal and that government has to treat us all as such. This is where a lot of people start getting tripped up on their quest to being more libertarian in their thinking. They encounter a hot button issue like gay marriage and immediately put the brakes on their, quote, keeping government out of our lives thinking. So you have to understand, freedom and liberty mean that everyone has the same natural rights that everyone else has. Rights that are retained by people just because they are human. These rights are not given by anyone or anything. They just exist within our very nature. Part of these rights are the pursuit of happiness as long as it does not infringe on anyone else's rights and freedoms. Now, the interesting thing to watch is the reaction of liberals in the media who applaud this decision and state that government has to treat everyone the same. But these are the same people who will say that government programs that are set up to reward one group of people over another are completely constitutional and see nothing wrong with treating one group of citizens differently than another. But as listeners to this show, you know that the overriding rule is freedom and liberty, whether you necessarily agree with someone's particular way of living or not. So here's a nice quote, and I've played this a couple of weeks ago on this show from Representative Dr. Ron Paul, which nicely sums up what your attitude on this should be.
I think the government should just be out of it. I think it should be done by the church or private contract, and we shouldn't have this argument. Who's married and who isn't married? I have my standards, but I shouldn't have to impose my standards on others. Others have standards, and they have no right to impose their marriage standards on me, and I just don't like it. But if we want to have something to say about marriage, it should be at the state level and not at the federal government. Just get the government out of it. It's one area where it's totally unnecessary and they've caused more trouble than necessary.
So there you go. You have your standards, I have my standards, and the government should not be endorsing yours over mine or vice versa. Now, you might be saying, well, Patrick, what about Christianity? And what about religion? What about what they have to say? Well, in response, I would tell you, don't do what you are not comfortable with doing. If your religion forbids marrying someone of the same sex, then don't do it. If you are not religious and still don't agree with it, again, just don't do it. It is the same thing as if your religion states that drinking any sort of alcohol is wrong. Then you should not do it. But the government should not take that to mean that it should strip away everybody's freedoms to drink if they so desire. Just because one group of people declare it to be wrong doesn't mean it's wrong for everybody. we should all be free to do as we wish, again, as long as it does not trample on the freedoms and liberties of another person. So why in the world, for instance, do I even have to get a marriage license to get married? Why is the government licensing marriages at all? Here in the state of Tennessee, marriage is actually regulated by state law. A state law regulating marriage in a state in a supposedly free country called America. So in Tennessee, to get married, I have to come up with $97.50 to get a license to be married. Yeah, Sean.
I just did that last October. Had to sit down with a member of our fine Knox County government and answer a bunch of questions and hand him a check and then get a piece of paper, and then I was married. Not after the ceremony. It's when I handed the check and the signed piece of paper over to the government. That's when I was married.
Which is ridiculous. Also, if you want, though, you can only pay $37.50. But if you do that, you have to have permission of someone else who is your could be an ordained minister or professional counselor.
Yeah, that's true. But even that, we tried to do that, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through for that too.
Yeah,
has to be someone that they verify, and you got to do it so many weeks in advance before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and which is, again, is just ridiculous. And as Sean just noted, the application for a marriage license, they want to know information like the groom's and bride's names, their birth dates and birth states, which number marriage this is for them, and why their last one ended and when it ended and why. They want to know their educational information. And even that is not enough. The state of Tennessee also has to know their prospective couple's parents' names as well. So I guess,
and where they're born.
Yeah, I just have to ask, what's this got to do with anything? The answer is nothing. It's because we have sat here and allowed ridiculous things like this to happen. And no, I'm not talking about marriage itself. I'm talking about the licensing of it. But could you imagine marriage in a libertarian world? Government would have nothing to do with it. Nothing. What would happen is that I would find somebody I love. Presumably, they would love me too. And we would decide we want to live together and maybe even raise a family. Now, before all the people who know me have a heart attack, I'm not saying I'm getting married, just to be clear, because most people know I equate the marriage ceremony and a funeral along roughly the same lines. But if I would decide to get married, though, and if I had any sort of property or money I'd want to protect coming into the marriage, and the person I'm marrying would probably have some as well, we would sit down at a lawyer's office and draw up a marriage contract. We would decide what we would get should things not work out, and then we'd get married. Now, if you really want to go down this road and try to see if you can think like a libertarian, let's throw this into the mix as well. Let's say we define in the marriage contract, I don't know, maybe a certain level of weight that must be maintained. Or the house must be a certain size. Or we must have a certain amount of children before a defined age. And if not by then children are not allowed. See, I can take the romance and excitement straight out of marriage, no problem. But really, marriage is a contract between two people. And things can be defined in that contract. And when things are defined, all sorts of problems can be avoided. But if you still want to do things the regular way, by just getting married and not having any sort of contract or anything else, then you could just say you're married. If you want to have a ceremony in your church, your synagogue, your mosque, or your house, you could. It is not anyone else's business what you do. Now, if things go south and you don't have details spelled out in a marriage contract, well, then you'd probably have to go to court to get everything straightened out. But that is what court is for, settling disputes among different parties. What about a business providing benefits, though, that normally gives benefits to the conventional spouse of one of its workers? Well, since we are imagining a libertarian-type society, we would also allow businesses to provide benefits to whomever they choose, however they choose. We would not compel them through law to provide anything. If a prospective employee did not like the package being offered, well, they don't have to work there. That is freedom. As far as the government is concerned, we the people, from whom the power to govern is derived, should not be providing anything other than a salary to the people who choose to work for the government. If they don't like that, then don't work there. In this libertarian type of world, the role of government is so small in the daily lives of people that, well, shoot, we probably don't need 1/10 of the employees we have there now anyway. So the issue of providing benefits in that situation, as far as the government's concerned, would just, it'd be moot. And this court ruling about providing federal social benefits to spouses in same-sex marriages would not apply either, because the government would not be providing those services in the first place. And that's how it would work in this magical society of living in a libertarian type of world. Now, don't fool yourself and think that's how this really happens. For the guys out there, I would suggest not bringing this type of thing up with their female counterpart, because I don't think you'd get very far. Do you, Shine? You're married.
Well, no, you got to. I mean,
yeah, that's
we live in the world we live in.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that. I mean, you were talking about kind of an ideal, and I personally would like it better if it was more of that world. But
yeah.
I had to do what I had to do in order to get, like you said, benefits and tax advantages, different things like that, where you have to do this thing the government asks you to do in order to, it's bait and switch or carrot at the end of the stick or that kind of deal.
Sure, yeah, it's the government dangling the carrot and saying, if you get married, we'll give you a better tax break, whereas that is you look in the Constitution, it doesn't specify anything like that.
Well, they justify the getting all that personal information and getting the license by saying you will get these benefits if you give up that information, or like what I
give
would
us
say,
some freedom.
Give us some freedom, and we'll buy you off here.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. This is Patrick Riggins with the Patrick Riggins Show. We'll return after these quick messages with the second half of the show. Be sure and tune in.